Bad lawyer jokes are an old genre, but if you're a consumer, finding a client-focused practice is serious. If you're an attorney, understanding today's ethical duty of care is critical. Anchored by current headlines and showcasing major legal minds, Ethical-ish speaks to consumers and attorneys about the modern, transparent law practice. Sponsored by Case Status, powered by LawPods.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest episode of Ethical-ish. I'm excited to have Professor Constance Anastopoulo joining us. Hello, Constance.
Hi, Paul. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, we are excited to be taken to school today. We know that you've taken a break out of the classroom of 60, maybe to have a classroom of 60,000 and maybe more. I don't know. I hope that we have a good audience of both practitioners, attorneys, but we also invite everyday people. So if I pause you on anything and say, hey, what does that mean? It's just because I probably don't know, and I'm trying to help the everyday person out there who is learning a little bit. But awesome to have you. And we're going to dive right into some ethical, discussions. This is Ethical-ish, and we want to talk about the crossroads of what's happening out there, technology, practices, etc. So as we dive in, I know we're going to talk a little bit about what you teach in the classroom, but maybe give us a little bit of background. Who is Constance? Where are you teaching? Do you still practice? In what capacity?
Well, again, Paul, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here and talking about ethics. That is one of the classes I teach. So I am a full professor at the Charleston School of Law in Charleston, South Carolina. I teach torts, insurance law, and professional responsibility or ethics. I also am a visiting professor at UCLA where I have been teaching insurance law and professional responsibility. So kind of bi-coastal a little bit and teach ethics on both sides of the country.
Well, I love the metaphor of both ends and everything in between. You do a little bit of continuing learning too, as well, right? It's not just the JD candidates. It's other folks that are out there in the wild practicing, correct?
I do. I teach a lot of CLEs. I also have the good fortune in South Carolina of teaching actually the judiciary. So I've been invited a couple of times by the Chief Justice of our Supreme Court to teach insurance law and some ethics to just make sure that the judges are up to speed on all the things that are changing in the ethics world, particularly with the judiciary.
Awesome. How long have you been teaching ethics, approximately?
Let's see. I've been a professor for 16 years. I was a practitioner for 15 before I came on board to teach. So it's been, I guess, most of that time I've been teaching ethics. I teach it pretty much every year. Yeah. And so it's been 16 years now.
16 years. Have you seen, have the ideas changed much over 16 years, or is it kind of the same core themes that you're teaching in the classroom?
Well, I think that's a great question. There are certain core things that are consistent in ethics when it comes to lawyers' professional responsibility. Things like duty of confidentiality, conflicts of interest, duty to former clients, current clients, prospective clients, duty of competence. Those things are static and consistent, and the rules don't change a lot around that. What has changed significantly is technology and law. And as technology continues to evolve and continues to change the practice of law, the ethics have to keep up with it. And so it's changed significantly and continues to change. I think about how certain courts and certain state bars right now are starting to promulgate rules around the use of artificial intelligence, the use in using ChatGPT, things like that to generate filings. So it's a consistently changing, it's constantly changing field with regard, particularly with technology.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, AI certainly grabs the headlines and is being applied in some good ways and maybe some marginal ways, but I can imagine how it opens up an ethical consideration that needs to be, taken in consideration. So is that part of the curriculum? Can you open up a little bit about, if I was at UCLA or Charleston School of Law and in one of your classes, are you getting into the AI side of it, or what are you hitting on with regards to technology?
Well, yes, I think that I think to take a step back a little bit and just talk about how really the area of client data and privacy, security, I think that's the biggest area in ethics right now. Security in the legal practice has been underscored by a huge spike in law firm data breaches over the last 3 years. I think statistically, since 2020, more than 750,000 Americans have had their personal
Wow.
information compromised as a result of law firm cyber attacks. So if you just think about how that number continues to grow, the question is, are lawyers taking the appropriate steps ethically to protect their client data? And that's everything from client information to case material to client engagement. All of that constitutes data. And so are law firms taking the appropriate steps to ensure that ethically they're meeting their duty of confidentiality? And I think that's where the biggest change has happened. For starters, comprehensive privacy and cybersecurity protocols, rigorous audits, testing, those are things that lawyers now have to proactively engage in order to meet their ethical standards.
Yeah, no, and that's tough, right? I mean, I can't imagine that a lot of that is focused on, I mean, the fact that you're teaching it in some capacity. I don't know, are other law schools following suit? Is this a unique thing, or could I go to any law school and get that kind of curriculum?
Well, every law school has to offer an ethics class. That's part of a required curriculum for all ABA accredited law schools. So every law school has it. Now, the content of it doesn't necessarily need to focus on technology, although I think it's a misstep for any PR class not to address the ethical responsibilities, particularly, again, associated with client data, client information, client storage, cloud storage. When I talk at CLEs or even to my students, they don't really understand what cloud storage is. Client engagement, encryption, end-to-end encryption, all of those things are important for lawyers to understand and investigate when they're talking about hiring or thinking about hiring a third-party provider. I'm not sure that particularly older lawyers and maybe some younger lawyers even understand that.
Yeah. Well, and I think this pace of it, I mean, technology is definitely in, I mean, that's, you look at just how microchips get smaller and smaller, and it's Moore's law, and the speed just keeps getting faster and faster. And so to keep up with, yeah, it was probably just 30 years ago where things were in a filing cabinet. It was phone call and letters, right? There's not a whole lot to worry about with regards to keeping items secure physically. But now we move to, disks that are spinning that maybe are in our own data centers, and now we're moving them into the cloud. So you bring up, yeah, again, I can imagine that it's maybe a disservice that technology isn't at the center of every curriculum. If I had to apply what I think of as a everyday consumer out there, I would hope they understand sort of the implications there.
Yeah, and it's there's also a supervisory capacity when you think about a law firm, for example. The supervising attorney is responsible for what the underling attorneys or the junior attorneys do. And so that understanding, even as a supervising attorney, you might not be the one doing the legal research on LexisNexis, but you have to ensure that your junior attorneys are still following their ethical protocols.
So let's say I take that to heart as a candidate or as a practicing, attorney out there. So I'm kind of playing to the audience that listens to this podcast who are not practitioners. They're everyday people, maybe in the hiring process, trying to find an attorney. I mean, is there a way? I guess there's no clear way to know whether my attorney understands the implications of technology and how it's being applied. And I mean, is there a certification, or is there some ways to sort of have a proof point, social proof, or otherwise, to know that the attorney that I'm hiring is actually taking the high road in protecting my information?
Yeah, I think if I were hiring today, some of the things that I would ask a candidate about is number one, what do they know or understand about the role of technology in the practice of law? I think I would start there. How and understanding how it can help your practice because it certainly increases efficiency. research is a lot faster now than the days when I was in law school and you had to pull a book off a shelf. You don't do that anymore. Now you put it in a computer and it generates potential cases. But there has to be a check on that, and that there are pitfalls. And so if I were hiring today, I'd want to understand what the candidate's understanding of both the ability to utilize technology in a way to help and be more efficient in the practice, but also understanding what the pitfalls of technology can be. I also think I would ask a candidate, what is your understanding of the ethical obligations around that? What are the responsibilities of a lawyer with regard to client data? And I think the last thing is maybe that I would ensure is when lawyers are thinking about hiring third-party providers. And again, with technology, there's case management software now, there's cloud storage software, there's client engagement software. All of those providers, it's the ethical responsibility of the attorney to ensure that those providers understand their ethical responsibility, because whatever responsibility is applied to the lawyer is then also imputed to their third-party providers.
Yeah. No, I love that you brought that up, because I think we have to give a professional nod to our accounting brothers and sisters out there, because I think it's the accountants that kind of came up with this, and it does make sense because they can always put a number on risk. But I think of standards like SOC 2 Type 2 and before it's SAS 70. And the whole point is to make sure that those cloud providers are adhering to a high standard of protection, right? Whether that's encryption of the data at rest, encryption of the data in motion, and making sure that all the other vulnerabilities are kept at bay. We're not insulated, any tech provider. I mean, case status here, we adhere to those high standards, and that's the reason why. But as you mentioned, breaches aren't, just tied to law firms. They're everywhere. I mean, we're constantly under attack by bad actors. And so I definitely agree with you. No matter what business you're in and no matter what consumer you're in, you should be asking these questions, and you should be demanding those levels of compliance. Good advice.
Yeah, I think it's easy for law firms, particularly when they're kind of building out their technology with these third-party providers, to sort of focus on who's the cheapest, who can I get for the cheapest. But I think that's a risky step. I think you have to look behind sort of the sales pitch and what kind of protections do these third-party providers, are they meeting those kind of standards, SOC 2, Type 2? Are they meeting those kinds of certifications? Because again, the lawyer's ethical duties are imputed to that third-party provider to ensure that they are compliant with what the lawyer's obligations are.
Yeah. And drop me those stats again that you mentioned earlier about the number of events that happened with law firms. Was it 700?
750,000
50,000.
law firms.
Okay.
Law firms have been cyber attacked since 2020.
I'm curious. I wonder what the average cost is to the firm when that goes down, right? Like the disclosure and the PR and the intake. I bet there's some study out there. We'll have to dig that up of what the cost is.
I was invited or hired by a law firm that suffered a cyber attack to consult with them about their ethical obligations, and I think it's a good story to think about in terms of highlighting some of the risks. What happened to this law firm was they had sufficient training, and that again is part of the ethical duty is the law firm training not only the lawyers but their staff, because again, that supervisory capacity, the ethical duties imposed on the lawyer are also imputed to the staff. The staff has to meet those, and it's an extension really of the lawyer. So what happened in this case was that the client was hacked, and a phishing email was generated through the client's server, or I guess electronic email. That phishing email looked like it came from the client. It had a link for a paralegal to click on to access supposedly documents that the client was sending. And when the paralegal clicked on it, that was the phishing email. And so they had a cyber attack. They ended up having not sufficient backup. and access to their material. That became an issue. And then they ended up having to pay a ransom. I don't know what that number is, but I don't think it was a small amount. And so the other part of that is most jurisdictions, and I think maybe all, have some kind of provision that require notice be sent to anyone whose data was hacked or exposed to a hacking. So they have to notify all their clients. That's not a good look for a law firm.
No, I think I've got a pile over here from medical providers. I think I've gotten one from basically every medical provider I've ever been associated with that seems to have been hacked. And yeah, again, not good for PR sending that out to your maybe once happy clients. Certainly a cost there. Back to your point of going after low cost, solutions. Spend some time, right? Make sure that they adhere to the highest standard. There's no guarantees, but at least you can minimize risk in that way, shape, and form. So, well,
Yeah, I think about it, you either pay on the front end or you pay on the back end, right?
the back end's a lot more expensive, I think, sometimes.
Right, right.
I'd rather have insurance and pay a little bit more upfront for peace of mind. But yeah, so coming back to the classroom, what's your favorite thing about teaching? I mean, obviously you've made a good career out of it. I mean, the students take to heart what they're learning. But yeah, what's your favorite thing about the classroom?
Wow, I have to say, the students, teaching students and working with young people is so gratifying. And to see a student come in and I teach 1Ls, I teach torts to 1Ls. And so when those 1Ls come in, they don't know the first thing about torts. Often they don't even know what a tort is. And to see the growth of those students over the academic year, and then to see them mature through their time in law school and then go on to become lawyers and watch their successes is so gratifying. So I have to say the students and just working with young people.
Well, that's awesome. And do you find that the younger students coming through, not to say they're all younger, I mean, there's some folks who decide career later on, but are they a little bit more tech savvy as you might sort of stereotypically think? Does it really land what you're talking about, and the light goes on when you're teaching on the technology front?
For sure. Sometimes when I'm in the classroom and I'm trying to do something with the technology in the classroom, they'll be like, well, professor, if you go down and you click this. And so they are so much more savvy than me.
Well, and these are the readers, right? Like these aren't the STEM people. They didn't choose to go to mechanical engineering school. They chose to be lawyers, right? They like to read and write. So kudos to them. Well, awesome. What else, what else is hot on this topic? Whether it's to the everyday, folks out there, to other practitioners, what would be sort of your closing statement of where to mobilize and where they can, really dust off on what you're talking about, right? You're really talking about kind of continuing education, but it's more applying those rules, the ABA model rules of professional conduct. I assume is kind of like the macro national thing that's happening, but each state bar. So if I'm an attorney out there listening, how can I, mobilize some of the things that you're talking about and learn more about what my responsibilities are in this modern era?
Well, I would say first the model rules of professional conduct. So most states have adopted almost verbatim the model rules. But there are some distinctions, and it's really beginning to show up in the area of technology. And so, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and even court to court, some federal courts are imposing notice provisions that require lawyers to disclose that they've used AI when writing any filing, a brief, a memorandum, even a complaint or an answer that has to be disclosed. So I would say the first thing for practitioners is know what the rules are in your jurisdiction, know what the rules are in your court with regard to technology. What do you have to disclose? What can you use? I think that's maybe the first thing for practitioners. But be familiar with the rules, keep up with them because the model rules are updated pretty consistently again as technology continues to evolve. The rules continue to evolve with them.
Yeah. No, I think they are good rules, and maybe every industry could use them. Although they are pragmatic too. I think they make a lot of sense, and but the fact that we need to apply them in these changing eras, I think is a lot of good guidance. So obviously, many of you out there listening are familiar with them, but maybe it doesn't hurt to go dust off and consider them with all the technology that's out there. Well, Constance, we really appreciate you sharing your thoughts today, and again, broadening your classroom to a little bit of a technology sort of setting. And to those of you out there listening, we appreciate you joining Ethical-ish, where we're trying to be provocative on this crossroads of legal ethics discussions, whether it's with technology or any of the other headlines that are sort of out there. So if you like what you've been hearing and it's adding value, whatever subscriber or whatever setup you're listening to this podcast, feel free to subscribe so that we can notify you of future episodes. But again, thanks, Constance. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate being here.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you on the next episode. Have a great day.
Lawyers and legal consumers, you are our audience and our biggest strength. If you find Ethical-ish a good investment of your time, please spread the word. Until next time. Sponsored by Case Status, powered by LawPods.